Hello, coaches. Let's talk about the coach knowledge assessment. I enjoy this. I know people don't like tests. I love this test. It is tough, but it is fun. I'm happy that this is one of the tools the International Coach Federation uses to assess coaches, because these are not standard questions that you get in high school. These are tougher questions. I kind of joke, it's like these are the questions of if a CEO, a COO, and a HRBP and a client walk into a bar where you are, which of them do you talk to? Like, in this scenario, who do you talk to? What do you do? What skills are you going to use? Which of these options is the best way to demonstrate the coaching process? If you have the scenario, which is the most coach-like behavior that you could choose and which is not? This coach knowledge assessment stretches the coaches. And in this video, I'm going to just point to this part of the website. Just search ICF space CKA, Coach Knowledge Assessment. You'll find it. This is coachfederation.org/coach-knowledge-assessment. It's not that important. I'll have it in the notes and stuff. But let's dive into the content here. I want you to check out much of this on your own. We're mainly going to look at what to expect. It's a tool that can be used to measure coaches' understanding, their mindset, their knowledge, their skills, what they would do in given situations, as well as the ethics. And this is not the best use of this bar. I wish we could get rid of it, but it's the way it is. So the content. The assessment covers 5 broad domains: setting the foundation, agenda setting, and big agenda setting, and ethics, co-creating the relationship, communicating effectively, facilitating learning and results, coaching foundations, and knowledge base, so like vocabulary and stuff. All questions are based on the ICF definition of coaching, the core competencies. I'm not sure if the coach knowledge assessment is updated with all the nuances of the new competencies, but it's less about the names of each competency and more about how they're used. So that's the main thing. Questions, the questions difficulty levels do vary a lot. Some will make you pause quite a while, and others you need to snap out pretty quick. And the reason for me saying that is the current version contains 155 multiple choice questions, and each one contains a short statement or question with 4 possible responses. And there's only one response that the ICF has established as being correct. And in some cases, it's almost like there's one response that the ICF has established as being more correct than the others, because there are some that would be passable, but more so like the ACC approach to the scenario rather than the PCC or MCC approach. So you really want to step into the PCC and MCC mind. For that, I definitely recommend the comparison chart that we often share. I'll have in the class page on this one, and it's in all of our assessments with our organization, a link to that comparison chart. I know it's out of date for some of the language, but it's not out of date in the comparisons between the levels. It's a great way to distinguish the approaches, at least the minimum passable levels for each of the credentials. It's a helpful tool that builds your mindset as a coach. And yeah, you want to have an awareness of which of these, and we're going to look at 5 questions, and each of them, which option has the most coach approach or is the most aligned with the definition of coaching. So let's look at these. And in our work on our class pages, we'll offer a handful of these practice questions with the class pages going forward from here. And let's start with a couple of the practice ones on the ICF's website. Now, I'm doing a favor for anyone who has not looked at their website because, unfortunately, the way the site is set up, they just bold the correct answer. So I'm going to read the question here and just read the answers that are below. I'm noticing I might need to stretch this out a bit. There we go. Domain, setting the foundation. The client is a high-energy manager with a generally positive outlook. Just before coming to the coaching session, the client was told that their responsibilities are about to drastically change and will no longer be doing the work they were passionate about. The client has come to the session in a particularly negative mood and has expressed the desire to address this situation during today's session. What is the best way for the coach to proceed? No, again, which is the most correct? So here are the four options. Say it out loud, which one's correct as we get to the end, and then I'll give you like 3 seconds and we'll go down. Ask the client about all of the potential positive outcomes from the situation. B, remind the client that the agenda for the session was set at the end of the last session. C, explore the outcomes for the session and ensure that the client and the coach are both clear on them. And D, point out to the client how extremely important it is to be passionate about the work we do. Those are the four options. Again, number one, or A, I forgot to say A at the beginning. A, ask the client about all of the potential positive outcomes from the situation. B, remind the client that the agenda was set for the session was set at the end of the last session. C, explore the outcomes for the session and ensure that the client and the coach are both clear on them. And D, point out to the client how extremely important it is to be passionate about the work we do. Let's look at those. The correct answer is C. And this is a really nice one. I like this question because if I were looking at this with an organization, I would say this answer has the magic thinking approach to coaching. That just the positive view will help. Asking about positive outcomes is a potential path. That's fine, but that's not necessarily what the client wants. Remind the client that the agenda was set. This is the authoritarian, that the coach is in charge. D, point out that to the client how extremely important it is to be passionate. This is the didactic. I'm here to teach what is true, and this client needs to be passionate. This is the most scary of all of them because this is saying in some ways that the client should look for a different job, and it is very prescriptive. I guess I should say subtly prescriptive about where the client should go from here. C is the most boring. You could say, explore the outcomes for the session and ensure the client and the coach are both clear on them. That's what you do every time. This is a funny one because the answer is do what you always do. And I say that in the nervous state video in this class, for this class session. When you're nervous, do the coaching process. When the client is struggling, do the coaching process because that process is partnering. The coach isn't expected to do some sort of magic here to fix the client. Instead, we allow the client to experience the coaching process to help. This next one, pretty straightforward. A client is explaining a situation to a coach who senses that there is more that the client is not sharing. How should the coach approach the situation? So this is co-creating the relationship, trust and intimacy, and the nature of coaching is here. Explaining the situation to coach, we have this intuition, man, there's more that the client's not sharing. How should the coach approach the situation? Here are the four options. A, interrupt the client and ask for greater disclosure. B, give the client the bottom line read on the situation. C, ask the client... C, ask the client's permission to probe a little deeper. D, give the client feedback on the importance of honesty in coaching. I'm going to go back through. A, interrupt the client and ask for greater disclosure. B, give the client the bottom line read on the situation. C, ask the client's permission to probe a little deeper. D, give the client feedback on the importance of honesty in coaching. Going down, we have C. Just tricky because it was just C. A, interrupt the client. The interrupt the client, there's not really a coach-specific reason for it. And asking for greater disclosure, that's a pretty abstract statement. I'm not exactly sure what the coach is doing with this. It does feel a more authoritarian approach. Give the client the bottom line read on the situation. This is where the coach is the expert, and I'm going to offer my bottom line of it and trust that it is correct. Now, it's fine to do with good direct communication to say, hey, I'm sensing something deeper here. Would it be okay if I gave my perspective and then we meet wherever you are from there? Here's what I'm sensing. And whatever I'm saying, I'm done. But that's my perspective. What are you sensing in this moment? What do you feel is going on in this moment? And so on. That's okay. But that's not the the best coach approach, we might say. We want to ask the client's permission to offer and ask permission to probe a little deeper, to say, hey, I'm sensing that there's something deeper here. Would it be okay if we explored it? So it's not about the coach taking charge and saying my bottom line is more important. It's like, let's start with the client's direction. So that's the most coach approach. And then here, you're lying to me. It's a great way to do coaching. No, C is the better option. Domain, communicating effectively. When dealing with a client who brings many issues to the table, it's best for the coach to pick the option A, where the coach has the most expertise. B, pick the option of asking what the client would like to start with. C, to pick the option that looks most likely to be handled in the time available. Or D, to pick the option that the coach thinks can do the most good for the client. A, where the coach has the most expertise. B, of asking what the client would like to start with. C, that looks most likely to be handled in the time available. D, that the coach thinks can do. It's so bad. It should say, it is best for the coach to pick the option and pick the option for each, because it's very confusing to read these. To pick the option that the coach thinks can do the most good for the client. It's hard to read. It's B. Goodness gracious. Read that sentence on your own. It's fun. Asking the client what they would like to start with. This is just the normal coaching approach. Expertise is the expert role. This is the ACC approach, where the coach is going to make the judgment of where we should go. And this is a bit of the parental approach. It goes probably below the line of ACC, where we are taking charge out of our goodwill. We're wanting to fix the client, so we're going to choose what's best for them. Goes out of partnership. Next, facilitating learning and results. I hope this is fascinating to see this sheet of paper, me reading it to you. But I hope you're enjoying the quizzing going on. And an appropriate role for a coach in goal setting, planning, and prioritizing with the client is A, critiquing and embellishing a client's goals. B, letting the client self-determine the need for goals. C, taking charge of the process to ensure it is completely accurate. D, facilitating a process around the client's goal setting, planning, and prioritizing. A, critiquing and embellishing the client's goals. B, letting the client self-determine the need for goals. C, taking charge of the process to ensure it is completed accurately. D, facilitating a process around the client's goal setting, planning, and prioritizing. It's the boring one. You just do what this says for you to do. An appropriate role in goal setting is to facilitate a client or a process around the client's stuff. We're not adding. We're not critiquing. We're not letting the client self-determine the need for goals. I actually want to highlight this one because it sounds right? But the coach always has two agendas. We do have two agendas. A, follow the client's agenda, which is the cheating answer. B, though, is really important. The coaching agenda of the coach has to, the coach knows that the coaching has to focus on growth. If the client isn't growing, the coach has to challenge that. And in goal setting, as a coach, we know that there is a need for goals. Everyone has a a need for goals just as part of who they are as people. So we need to make sure that our goals, that the coaching process is establishing goals. Now, those goals might be to have more clarity in their lives, to take some months to do some introspection. It doesn't have to be fully clear. That can be part of the coaching process. Taking charge of the process to make sure it's done right. Nope, we just follow the coaching process. Finally, this one's an easy one. Knowledge base. This is like the vocabulary section of the test. Every coaching conversation should include what? An action plan, A, an action plan. B, an agenda identified by the client. C, review of field work. D, a summary by the coach of the client's progress. Again, A, an action plan. B, an agenda identified by the client. C, review of field work. D, a summary by the coach of the client's progress. And the answer is the agenda, identified by the client. We might not have an action plan every time. We don't need to review the field work every time. That's something that over time in coach training, in the ACC role, this is almost like a given that the coach leads this. But at PCC and MCC, the coach can check in with the client on how much they'd like to review the field work, the homework, the commitment they had. And then a summary by the coach at the end of the session. We talk a lot about partnering with the client and wrapping up the session. Don't summarize at the end. So make the agenda. So this is a little practice. You won't have any more videos of me reading with awkward tones the 4 answers to choose from, but you will see these on our class pages, some more examples. But this is what that coach knowledge assessment feels like. You need to be able to demonstrate your coaching mindset as part of your experience with the coach, with the ICF, but you also need to be able to answer these kinds of questions with any organization you'd like to work with. Not directly as if you're selling to a sponsor, but if you're going to work with a group of coaches and serve alongside them, this type of assessment is a great way for them to know the way you think as a coach. So be ready for that. Hope this is helpful, and thank you for growing as a coach.